In the last decade, two cartels have plunged Mexico into its deadliest conflict yet. A war so brutal it has redrawn the criminal map of an entire nation. On one side, the Sinaloa cartel, a smuggling empire decades in the making. On the other side, CJNG, a ruthless upstart deploying weaponized drones and armored convoys across 27 states. Between them, nearly 1 million civilians displaced, billions in drug revenue at stake, and a body count that is still climbing. What turned two criminal organizations into warring armies began with a single act of betrayal. In the late 1980s, as the remnants of the Guadalajara cartel scattered, a new force began to take shape in northwest Mexico. From the rugged mountains of Sinaloa, three men, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, and Juan Jose El Azul Esparragoza, built an alliance that would soon dominate the world's drug trade. Their vision was simple but effective, a cartel structured not as a rigid hierarchy, but as a federation of semi-autonomous cells. Each cell controlled its own territory and operations, but all answered to a central leadership that managed logistics, money laundering, and political protection. At the heart of this network stood El Chapo, a man whose reputation for both ruthlessness and cunning became legend. Under his leadership, the Sinaloa cartel transformed from a regional trafficking group into a global enterprise. The cartel's stronghold in Culiacan became the nerve center for a sprawling operation that moved cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and later methamphetamine across borders with near impunity. Smuggling routes stretched from the Pacific coast to the U.S. border, using everything from hidden compartments in trucks to elaborate tunnel systems burrowed beneath the ground. The Sinaloa model thrived on flexibility and deep institutional ties. Local bosses, known as plaza leaders, were given autonomy, but they shared profits through a sophisticated system of revenue splits. This decentralized approach made the cartel resilient. When authorities captured one leader, another could step in without disrupting the flow of drugs or money. Sinaloa's reach extended beyond narcotics, embedding itself in local economies and politics through bribes, intimidation, and a network of front companies that laundered billions in illicit profits. For decades, this federated structure allowed Sinaloa to outlast rivals and weather government crackdowns. Its influence stretched across Mexico and deep into the United States, setting the standard for organized crime in the hemisphere. The cartel's roots ran so deep that even as new threats emerged, Sinaloa's grip on the drug trade remained unbroken until a violent new challenger appeared. In 2010, a new name began to spread fear across central Mexico: Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. At its core stood Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, a former police officer turned fugitive who would become one of the most hunted men in the world. El Mencho took the shattered remains of the Milenio cartel and forged them into a single, ruthless organization. Where Sinaloa relied on a web of alliances and local autonomy, the CJNG enforced a strict, military-style chain of command. Orders came from the top, from El Mencho himself, and disobedience was punished with death. CJNG's rise was not gradual. It was explosive. Within months, the group unleashed a campaign of violence that stunned rivals and authorities alike. Their doctrine was simple: seize territory by overwhelming force, eliminate all opposition, and leave no doubt about who controlled the streets. Former soldiers and police officers filled their ranks, bringing combat experience and tactical discipline. The group's first moves targeted Jalisco and neighboring states, using convoys of armed men to storm police stations, assassinate enemies, and broadcast their power with chilling displays. Bodies hung from bridges, banners taunting authorities, convoys of armored trucks rolling through city streets. Unlike past cartels that operated in the shadows, CJNG made its presence impossible to ignore. The group's centralized leadership allowed it to coordinate attacks across multiple regions at once, striking with terrifying speed. By the end of 2011, CJNG had established itself as a dominant force in Jalisco, Colima, and Michoacan. Its leaders demanded absolute loyalty, and its soldiers carried out massacres to warn off rivals and silence communities. El Mencho's vision was clear: total control achieved through military precision and unrelenting brutality. The era of the CJNG had begun, and a new kind of cartel war was about to engulf Mexico. On March 13, 2010, a single act of betrayal tore apart the uneasy alliance between Sinaloa and the Millennial faction that would soon become CJNG, Sinaloa's central command, seeking to tighten its grip on the lucrative Guadalajara-Zapopan corridor. Raised the tax on drug shipments by 30%. The Millennial group, already wounded by the murder of its boss, Oscar Valencia, the year before, refused. What followed was swift and violent. Millennial gunmen ambushed a convoy carrying Sinaloa's Plaza Lieutenant, Ignacio Coronel Little, killing him and seizing his cash. This was no ordinary turf dispute. To Sinaloa's leadership, the attack was a direct violation of their code, a betrayal that demanded blood. Within 2 days, Sinaloa dispatched a combined force of loyal enforcers and corrupt ex-police into Jalisco. The neighborhoods of Las Lomas and El Salto erupted into open combat, with automatic weapons rattling through residential streets. Local news called it the bloodiest shootout in a decade. For the first time, the violence was not hidden in back alleys or remote highways, but played out in broad daylight, with both sides fighting for control of a plaza that generated an estimated $3 billion a year in drug profits. The aftermath shattered any hope of reconciliation. The Millennial survivors, led by Nemesio Oseguera, broke from Sinaloa and rebranded themselves as CJNG. What began as an internal dispute over revenue and territory had now become a war between two organizations, one with deep roots and federal connections, the other with a new, centralized command and a hunger for conquest. The contest for plazas, territorial strongholds that controlled the flow of drugs, cash, and influence, became the front line. The first firefights in Jalisco, and soon after in Zacatecas and Colima, signaled that the era of shadow deals was over. From this point, rivalry gave way to open warfare, setting the stage for a conflict that would engulf entire regions in bloodshed. Convoys of armored trucks, bristling with gun ports and steel plating, now roll through the battlefields of central Mexico. CJNG workshops churn out improvised armored vehicles, known as monstruos, built from civilian pickups and SUVs, their windows replaced with thick ballistic glass, their sides reinforced to withstand rifle fire and even grenades. These machines are not just for show. In firefights across Jalisco and Guanajuato, forensic teams have documented the aftermath: vehicles riddled with .50 caliber rounds, engine blocks shattered by RPG-7 blasts, and spent shell casings littering the roads. The arsenal fueling this war is unlike anything seen in Mexico's previous cartel conflicts. CJNG units wield AK-47 rifles, FNSC AR rifles, and Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifles, many traced back to U.S. gun shops and military surplus. But the escalation does not stop at ground level. In 2017, CJNG carried out the first documented drone bombing in Tepic. Commercial quadcopters, bought online and modified in clandestine drone labs, now drop 5-kilogram explosive charges with GPS-guided precision. By 2023, investigators uncovered a dedicated drone assembly site in Guanajuato, where technicians fitted drones with plastic explosives and remote detonators, turning the sky into a new front line. Seizures of RPG launchers and man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS, by Mexican authorities confirm a growing threat to both rival convoys and low-flying helicopters. Between 2015 and 2021, federal police recovered 62 RPG launchers and 14 MANPADS from CJNG strongholds. These weapons, originally designed for battlefields, have been turned against both cartel enemies and security forces. In one notorious incident, a CJNG unit used a .50 caliber rifle to bring down a police helicopter during a raid in 2022. The combination of armored vehicles, heavy weapons, and weaponized drones has transformed cartel warfare. Where past conflicts relied on ambushes and hit-and-run attacks, today's battles mimic military operations, with coordinated assaults, signal jamming, and aerial strikes. The firepower now unleashed in Mexico's cartel war is not just a show of force. It is a warning that the rules of engagement have changed, and the risks to both combatants and civilians have never been higher. Tijuana, Juárez, and Guanajuato are more than names on a map. They are the engine rooms of Mexico's drug war, each corridor worth billions in annual revenue. The battle for these strategic plazas is not about symbolism or pride. It is about control over the arteries that pump methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin north into the United States, and cash and weapons back into cartel hands. In Tijuana, the fight is for the San Isidro Crossing, the world's busiest land border, where a single truckload of fentanyl can net millions. Models from the Drug Enforcement Administration and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimate that the Tijuana corridor alone generates between $4 and $6 billion every year. Whoever holds this gateway decides not just who profits, but who lives and dies in the city's neighborhoods. Juárez, once the undisputed domain of Sinaloa, is a different battleground. The El Paso crossing and a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the border make this corridor a funnel for heroin and, increasingly, fentanyl. Control here is worth $3 to $5 billion per year, a sum that fuels the arms race between cartels and bankrolls, corrupt officials on both sides of the border. When CJNG forced its way into Juárez after 2018, the violence was immediate and relentless, with both sides willing to raze entire neighborhoods for a slice of the revenue. Guanajuato is the newest front, a hub for methamphetamine labs and a key link in the so-called golden triangle of synthetic drug production. By 2021, CJNG controlled an estimated 70% of this corridor, pushing Sinaloa into isolated pockets near Leon. The annual prize is $2 to $3 billion, much of it laundered through front companies, extortion rackets, and cryptocurrency. Each of these corridors is a war zone, not because of ideology, but because the money at stake is enough to buy armies, politicians, and silence. The profits erupt where the returns are highest, and the fight for these plazas has turned Mexico's drug war into a conflict with no boundaries and no rules. Entire villages in Zacatecas, Jalisco, and Guanajuato now stand empty, their homes abandoned to weeds and silence. The exodus is not a trickle, but a flood. About 850,000 people forced from their homes since 2018, according to Mexico's National Migration Institute. Families flee at night, carrying only what they can, leaving behind livestock, crops, and the graves of loved ones. Some move north, hoping for asylum. Others scatter to shelters in distant cities, their futures uncertain. Mass graves have become a grim signature of this war. In 2022 and 2023 alone, forensic teams exhumed approximately 1,200 bodies from clandestine burial sites across Guanajuato, Michoacan, and Jalisco. Most victims were never formally reported missing, snatched from highways, extorted at checkpoints, or disappeared during house raids. The remains show signs of execution: hands bound, gunshot wounds from high-caliber weapons, plastic ties cutting into bone. DNA labs work day and night, matching fragments of clothing or dental records to the long lists of the disappeared. Schools have shuttered in dozens of towns. In Guanajuato's highlands, teachers stopped coming after armed men stormed classrooms, searching for the children of rival cartel members. Parents keep children indoors for weeks at a time, windows taped over to muffle the sound of gunfire. Health clinics run short on trauma supplies, overwhelmed by injuries from stray bullets and shrapnel. The psychological wounds run just as deep. Local surveys show a sharp rise in depression, anxiety, and sleep disorders, children drawing pictures of helicopters, armored trucks, and masked men. Survivors speak in whispers, afraid their names might be heard. One woman, her face never shown, describes the night her village emptied, the roar of trucks, the pounding on doors, the order to leave or die. She has not returned, nor has she found her missing brother. For hundreds of thousands, this is the hidden cost of the CJNG versus Sinaloa war. A life uprooted, a loved one vanished, a future stolen in the crossfire. The extradition of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to the United States in January 2016 sent shockwaves through the Sinaloa cartel. With its most visible leader gone, the once unified federation splintered into bitterly competing factions. The Chapitos, El Chapo's sons, clashed with the old guard loyal to Ismael El Mayo Zambada and the financial power of Los Quines. These rivalries erupted into violence across Sinaloa's core territories, thinning the cartel's grip just as its enemies circled. CJNG, sensing opportunity, launched an aggressive campaign of expansion. Under El Mencho's command, the group moved with a speed and force that stunned security analysts. Within 8 years, CJNG established a presence in 27 Mexican states, a footprint unmatched by any previous cartel. DEA indictments from 2023 and 2024 mapped CJNG cells not just in Jalisco and Michoacan, but deep into Baja California, Sonora, Veracruz, and even the Yucatan Peninsula. The group's ambitions reached beyond Mexico, with logistics hubs in Colombia, Spain, and West Africa feeding a global supply chain. Analysts now describe the Mexican criminal map as a patchwork of contested plazas, each one a battleground between entrenched Sinaloa networks and CJNG's relentless advance. The old order, built on alliances and hidden deals, gave way to a new era of open, militarized warfare. The power vacuum left by El Chapo's extradition did not produce peace. Instead, it fueled the bloodiest phase of the cartel war, with no region truly safe from the violence. Sinaloa's foundation goes deeper than firepower or street muscle. Its staying power is built on a web of family-run front companies, generational loyalty, and a system of bribery that shields its business from the inside out. Money doesn't just flow north with the drugs. It cycles through car dealerships, real estate, and agricultural firms, each layer designed to wash billions in cartel profits. In Culiacan, entire neighborhoods are built with laundered cash, and legitimate businesses double as cartel safe houses or meeting points. Protection isn't just bought from street cops. Municipal police chiefs, state officials, and even military commanders have been implicated in accepting regular protection payments. In Jalisco and Guanajuato, police units are documented receiving monthly quotas from both Sinaloa and CJNG, ensuring that armored convoys and drone teams move through checkpoints untouched. Investigators tracing extortion rackets and shell companies find the same surnames repeating across decades. Sons and nephews inheriting both legitimate businesses and criminal responsibilities. This entrenched complicity creates a shield that neither arrests nor military raids can easily penetrate. Even as CJNG surges forward with violence and technology, Sinaloa's old networks, rooted in family, bribery, and institutional relationships, slow the momentum, locking the war into a grinding, bloody stalemate. Guns cross the border from the United States into Mexico by the thousands. Over 70% of firearms seized from cartel convoys can be traced back to American dealers. In return, fentanyl and methamphetamine pour north, hidden in cargo trucks and passenger cars, feeding an opioid crisis that claims tens of thousands of lives each year. The same routes that move drugs and money now move military-grade rifles, .50 caliber ammunition, and drone parts. This is not just a Mexican war, it is a cross-border feedback loop, sustained by demand and enabled by weak controls on both sides. Analysts studying the current map see no clear victor. CJNG controls more territory than ever. But Sinaloa's old networks remain deeply entrenched in key corridors and urban centers. Every attempt to crush one group only seems to strengthen the other. The DEA and Mexican security forces seize record amounts of fentanyl, tens of tons each year. Yet the flow never stops. United States gun laws remain porous, fueling an arms race that neither side can win outright. What began as a fight for plazas has become a grinding deadlock, with each cartel adapting, regrouping, and striking back as soon as they are pushed from one stronghold. The war's violence, technology, and profits continue to escalate, but the lines on the map barely move. In the end, the only certainty is more bloodshed, more displacement, and a stalemate that shows no sign of breaking. Today, Mexico's two most powerful cartels remain locked in a war without mercy. Sinaloa's fractured empire faces CJNG's relentless, militarized advance. Drones, armored convoys, and billions in drug profits drive a conflict that engulfs entire cities, while mass graves and displaced families mark its human cost. As corruption shields the killers and U.S. demand fuels the carnage, the line between battleground and homeland grows terrifyingly thin.